A symbolic scepter, the soul of the Windsor male line, vanished in the night, dragging with it a dark secret that shook the corridors of power. What seemed like a reckless act by Camilla was the spark of a deeper conspiracy where loyalty was tested and honor threatened. Camilla, the queen, lurking in the shadows with sharp eyes and a smile masking unfathomable schemes. Facing her is William the heir, bearing the flame of resolve, determined to protect the legacy at all costs. Caught in the fragile divide, Charles remained silent. A king, trapped in the shadows of love and duty, his gaze concealing an untold secret. The cost of betrayal is not just a stolen scepter, but a deep fracture within the royal family where whispers could destroy an entire dynasty. What lies behind Charles's silent gaze? And what secret still lingers in the palace's dark corners? Will Camilla bow before the storm William unleashes? Or is a darker plot being woven awaiting its moment to erupt? Buckingham Palace, a gloomy winter morning when faint rays of sunlight pierced London's thick fog, barely illuminating the ancient stone walls. In the Royal Archive Room, the air was cold, steeped in the scent of time. Polished oak shelves, intricately carved, held glittering treasures, jeweled crowns, silver swords, and medals etched with the triumphs of past reigns. At the room's center, under the shimmering light of a crystal chandelier, William, Prince of Wales, stood tall, his deep blue eyes cold yet burning with resolve. Today was the day to inventory the royal assets. A sacred ritual he regarded as an unshakeable duty, a way to safeguard the Windsor legacy against the tides of time. Beside him, Henry, the gaunt, white-haired keeper of the royal treasury, flipped through a thick, leather-bound ledger. Its yellowed pages, handwritten in black ink, meticulously recorded every item from Queen Victoria's pearl ring to the bronze shield King George Ions held during World War II. Each line was a piece of history, and William always felt a deep connection when touching them. But when Henry reached the page, detailing the Prince of Wales's symbolic scepter, a relic of ebony wood engraved with ancient Celtic patterns and topped with a gleaming emerald, a symbol of power and succession, he froze. His bony hands trembled, his face paling as if he'd seen a ghost. "Your Highness," Henry whispered, his voice faltering with fear. "The scepter. It's gone." William spun around, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Gone," he repeated, his low voice laced with barely contained fury. "Explain. Yourself, Henry. How could a royal treasure vanish?" Henry bowed his head, sweat beading on his wrinkled brow. He flipped back through the ledger as if hoping he'd misread. I checked twice, Your Highness. The wooden box where the scepter is kept. It's empty." William strode to the storage shelf, where an oak box carved with a dragon, the symbol of Wales, sat in the most prominent position. He opened the lid slowly, as if dreading Henry's words were true. Inside, the red velvet lining gleamed vividly, but the cold, empty space where the scepter once rested gripped his heart. The scepter was more than an object. It was the soul of the Windsor male line, passed down through generations from Edward VII to his father, King Charles III, and destined for him. Losing it was akin to violating the honor of the entire royal family. William clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms, yet his face remained eerily calm. "The security cameras," he said, his voice icy. "Have they been checked?" Henry swallowed hard, his eyes avoiding William's. "Yes, Your Highness, but the cameras in this area were disabled last night. There's no footage." A chill ran down William's spine. Disabled cameras. This was no accident. The Royal Archive was an impregnable fortress, heavily guarded with state-of-the-art security. Only a select few had access, and disabling the cameras could only be deliberate. William turned to Henry, his gaze probing as if to pierce the man's soul. "Who has access to this vault, Henry? Tell me the truth." Henry hesitated, his lips pressed tight as if wrestling with himself. Finally, he whispered, barely audible, "Only a few, Your Highness. Myself, the senior guards, and Queen Camilla." Camilla's name hit William like an invisible dagger to the chest. Camilla, the woman with a polite smile, but eyes that always held something inscrutable. He had never fully trusted her, not because she was his father's wife, but because of the ambition lurking in her every word and deed. But would she dare go this far? Would she dare touch the sacred Windsor legacy? William ordered Henry to keep the matter secret, his voice sharp as a military command. "Not a word of this leaves this room, Henry. Understood?" Henry nodded frantically, his face still pale. William turned and left the room, his mind swirling with questions. He needed evidence. He needed action. Above all, he needed the truth. That night, in the dim light of the palace corridors, William stood by a large window, gazing at the royal gardens, shrouded in darkness. Bare branches swayed in the cold wind, as if whispering the palace's secrets. Soft footsteps approached, and he turned to see James, a young guard who had served him since his teenage years. James bowed, his eyes flickering with unease. "Your Highness," James said, his voice low, glancing around to ensure no one overheard. "I heard a rumor. I'm not sure it's true, but the scepter was seen in the hands of Tom Parker B.S. Tom's name sent a jolt through William. Tom Parker B.S.A., Camilla's son, an outsider with no Windsor blood, daring to touch the royal legacy. But then, like the final piece of a puzzle falling into place, William saw the truth. Tom wasn't acting alone. Behind him was Camilla, the woman always seeking to expand the definition of royal family to include her son in the echelons of power. A bold, dangerous conspiracy. William clenched his fists, nails nearly drawing blood. "Thank you, James," he said, his voice cold as ice, but inside a fire of rage burned. "Keep this quiet. I'll handle it." James nodded and slipped back into the shadows. William stood still, his gaze fixed on Camilla's quarters at the end of the corridor. He could imagine her smug smile, her sharp eyes challenging the world. But she had chosen the wrong opponent. William wasn't just the Prince of Wales. He was the guardian of the legacy, and he would let no one tarnish it. He turned, striding forward with a purpose. Each step was a silent declaration of war. The battle had just begun, and William vowed not to stop until the scepter was back where it belonged, and the traitors paid the price. The afternoon at Buckingham Palace was cloaked in thick fog, as if the very air tensed for the coming storm. William walked through the marble corridors, each step echoing with resolve like war drums. His eyes were cold, but a suppressed fury burned within. He had spent the night piecing together clues about the scepter's theft. Camilla's and Tom Parker B.S.E.'s names echoed in his mind like an unerasable accusation. Today, he would confront her not as Charles's son, but as the guardian of the Windsor legacy. The oak door to Camilla's private parlor was intricately carved, but to William, it was the gate to an enemy's stronghold. He knocked once, sharp and forceful, as if to shatter the silence. A smooth yet cutting voice called from within, "Come in." William pushed the door open. The room glowed with warm light from the fireplace, but the air was as cold as ice. Camilla sat in a red velvet armchair holding a delicate porcelain teacup, her lips pursed in a polite smile. Dressed in an emerald silk gown, her silver hair neatly pinned, she exuded untouchable elegance. But William wasn't fooled. He knew behind that perfect facade was a razor-sharp mind always calculating. "William," Camilla said, her voice sweet but tinged with defiance. "What a surprise to see you at this hour. Is something urgent?" William didn't answer immediately. He stood, tall hands clasped behind his back, his gaze locked on Camilla as if to pierce her mask. "The Prince of Wales is Scepter," he said, his voice low and steely. "It's gone from the archive, and I know where it is." Camilla's smile faltered for a split second, enough for William to notice her surprise. But she quickly regained composure, setting her teacup down with deliberate slowness. "Oh, how troubling," she said, her voice soft yet sharp. "But how do you think I'm involved?" William stepped closer, narrowing the distance between them. "Don't pretend, Camilla. I know the scepter's with Tom, and I know you're behind it." His voice wasn't loud, but each word landed like a hammer. "That's the Windsor legacy. Return it now." Camilla raised her chin, her eyes narrowing with a glint of arrogance. She stood slowly as if to assert she wasn't intimidated. "William, you're mistaken," she said, her voice calm, but laced with a chess player's cunning. "The scepter is a family heirloom, isn't it? And Tom is family." Her words struck William like a dagger to his pride. He felt his blood boil, but restrained himself, keeping his voice steady. "Family." He repeated his tone, almost a whisper dripping with disdain. "Tom doesn't carry Windsor blood. He has no right to touch the scepter. And you know it." Camilla smiled, a cold smile as if relishing the moment. "Oh, William, how rigid you are," she said, stepping toward the fireplace, its glow highlighting the fine lines around her eyes. "The royal family isn't immutable. I only want to broaden the definition of family. Tom is my son, and I am the queen. Isn't that enough to make him part of the legacy?" William clenched his fists, nails biting into his palms until they stung. Camilla's words weren't just a defense. They were a declaration of war. She was challenging his authority, defying centuries of tradition. "The royal family isn't yours to redefine," he retorted, his voice icy, each word a blade. "The scepter is a symbol of the Windsor male line, not a toy for your power games." The room grew stifling. They stood facing each other, eyes locked like duelists in an arena. Camilla maintained her smile, but her gaze hardened, as if realizing William wasn't an opponent easily subdued. "You're blowing this out of proportion, William," she said, her voice soft but carrying a hint of menace. "Be careful. This palace isn't just yours and yours. Rigid ideals." William didn't respond. He turned and left the room, each step heavy with purpose. He knew this wasn't a mere argument. It was the start of a war. Camilla had drawn the line, and he wouldn't let her cross it. In his heart, a silent vow took root. He would reclaim the scepter no matter the cost. As the door closed behind him, William heard the sharp clink of Camilla's teacup on the table, a small but piercing sound, as if she were sending a final message she wasn't defeated, and the game was far from over. The morning at Clarence's house was cloaked in gray light, as if London's sky mirrored William's heavy mood. He entered King Charles IIE's study, where towering oak bookshelves held ancient to the scent of old wood mingled with the fragrance of roses from the garden outside. Charles sat behind a grand desk, his gaunt hands flipping through documents, but his eyes seemed distant, lost in another realm. William stood before his father, shoulders squared, his heart a storm of anger, disappointment, and a faint hope that Charles would side with him. Father William began, his voice low but firm. "The Prince of Wales's scepter has been stolen. I know Camilla is behind it, and Tom Parker B.S. is holding it." Charles looked up, his eyes clouded by age and the burdens of the crown. He pushed the documents aside but didn't speak immediately. His silence was an invisible wall suffocating William. William Charles finally said, his voice frail, almost wary. "Are you certain of this? That's a serious accusation." William clenched his fists, struggling to stay calm. "I'm certain, Father. The archive security cameras were disabled the night the scepter disappeared. Only a few have access, and Camilla is one of them. I confronted her. She didn't deny it." Charles sighed, a heavy sound carrying the weight of the crown. He stood slowly and walked to the window, gazing at the fog-drenched garden. "Camilla, she's only protecting her son," he said, almost a whisper. "Perhaps this is a misunderstanding." William felt his blood surge. A misunderstanding. The scepter was a symbol of power, of the Windsor legacy, not a tool for Camilla's personal ambitions. He stepped closer to his father, his voice firmer. "This isn't a misunderstanding, Father. Camilla is trying to insert Tom into the royal hierarchy, defying tradition. If we don't act, what's to stop her from doing this again?" Charles turned, his eyes filled with conflict. William saw the struggle within love for Camilla, warring with duty to the royal legacy. But instead of answering, Charles shook his head lightly. "Let me think on it, William. Don't rush to conclusions." Charles's silence cut William like a knife. He had hoped his father would stand up, defend the legacy he swore to protect. Instead, he got evasion. William bowed, not out of respect, but to hide the disappointment burning in his chest. "I understand, father," he said coldly, then turned and left. Meanwhile, in another corner of the palace, Camilla sat in her private parlor, the firelight casting shadows on her face, highlighting her smug smile. She held a glass of red wine, her fingers tracing its rim as if savoring victory. Yesterday's confrontation with William hadn't shaken her. William might be fierce, but he was just a prince while she was the queen, and Charles, her husband, had chosen silence. A soft knock sounded. Tom Parker B.S. entered, his face etched with worry. Mother Tom said, his voice low. "William knows he won't stop. What do we do?" Camilla sipped her wine, her eyes sharp as a predator's. "Don't worry, Tom," she said, her voice calm but brimming with confidence. "William may be angry, but he has no concrete proof. And Charles," she paused, her smile widening. "Charles won't oppose me. You see, even the king is on our side because I'm right." Tom nodded, but unease lingered in his eyes. He knew the scepter was hidden in his private safe per his mother's orders, but the thought of facing William sent shivers down his spine. "What if William finds proof?" he asked, his voice trembling. Camilla set her glass down and stood approaching her son. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her gaze instilling strength. "Let him try," she said coldly. "William be the heir, but I'm the queen, and in this palace power lies not just in the crown, but in those who know how to wield it." Tom nodded, but a lingering unease smoldered within him. He knew his mother was formidable, but William was a storm not to be underestimated. London's fog was thicker than ever, a veil hiding the schemes weaving through Buckingham Palace's corridors of power. In the council chamber, the crystal chandeliers cast light on the stern faces of the royal advisors as nobles and seasoned politicians. Camilla, elegant in a charcoal silk dress, sat at the table's edge, her hands lightly clasped, but her sharp eyes weaving an invisible web. She knew this was her moment to strike back, to turn William from a defender of legacy into a selfish figure in the eyes of the influential. The meeting began with routine matters, budgets for royal events, charity plans, diplomatic invitations. But when an advisor mentioned the scepter's disappearance, a rumor now leaking within the palace, Camilla seized her chance. She leaned forward, her voice soft but cutting like a blade wrapped in velvet. "I fear we're witnessing an unfortunate misunderstanding." Camilla began, her gaze sweeping the room, gauging reactions. Prince William, with all his zeal, seems overly rigid in protecting what he calls the Windsor legacy. But should we ask, is he defending tradition or merely guarding his own spotlight? Her words rippled through the room like a stone in a still pond. Some advisors frowned, others exchanged glances. Lord Edward Langley, an elderly earl with white hair, spoke, his voice deep with skepticism. "What do you mean?" "Your Majesty, Prince William has always been loyal to tradition." Camilla smiled, a blend of warmth and cunning. "Of course, I don't doubt William's loyalty," she said, her tone sweet but laced with subtle mockery. "But consider this, the scepter is a family heirloom, and family isn't limited to blood. Tom, my son, is part of this family. Is William's strong reaction driven by fear of losing his position? Fear that someone outside the Windsor male line might be recognized?" Her words were a poisoned arrow spreading swiftly. Some advisors nodded, their eyes thoughtful. Lady Margaret, known for her neutrality, cleared her throat. "If what you say is true, perhaps we should reconsider. The monarchy has always evolved with the times. William may be too inflexible." The room grew heavy, but Camilla remained composed. She knew she had planted seeds of doubt. The rumors spread beyond the chamber through whispers in corridors and discreet conversations among palace staff. "William only wants to hoard power," a servant murmured. "He doesn't want to share the spotlight, not even with the Queen's son," a guard added. The whispers, like a toxic wind, swept through the palace and beyond, reaching the media. Meanwhile, at Kensington Palace, William stood at his desk, hands braced on the oak surface, staring at a security report. The rumors about him were spreading that he was selfish, afraid of losing status, too harsh on Tom Parker BS. Each word was a dagger, not because it hurt his pride, but because it eroded the trust of his supporters. He clenched, his fist nails leaving red marks. Kate, the Princess of Wales, entered, her gentle but worried eyes meeting his. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice soft. "William, you can't let these rumors shake you. Camilla is deliberately smearing you." William turned, his eyes blazing with anger, but also resolve. "She thinks she can defeat me with words," he said, his voice low but sharp. "She's wrong. I'm not fighting for glory. I'm fighting for our legacy. For Father, for me, for George." At Clarence's house, Camilla sat in her parlor, a sparkling glass of champagne in hand. The firelight illuminated her triumphant smile. A report from a council ally confirmed the rumors about William were spreading, and some members were questioning his motives. Camilla sipped her champagne victory, swelling in her chest. William might be strong, but she was a master manipulator, not with force, but with timely, well-placed whispers. She stood and walked to the window, gazing at the rain-soaked garden. "William, you're too young to understand," she murmured, as if addressing his shadow in her mind. "This palace isn't just about legacy. It's about power, and I won't let you monopolize it." Her smile grew colder. She believed William couldn't turn the tables. But she didn't know that in the shadows, William was preparing his own counterattack. A relentless fight to protect what was his and the Windsor legacy. Rain fell relentlessly outside Kensington Palace, droplets streaking the windows like London's tears. In his private study, William sat at the oak desk, the lamplight highlighting his tense, resolute features. Camilla's rumors were spreading like wildfire, tarnishing his honor, turning him from a legacy's defender into a selfish figure in some eyes. Each whisper in the palace, each skeptical glance from advisors cut into his pride. But William didn't falter. To reclaim the scepter and defeat Camilla, he needed allies, not just loyal ones, but those tough enough to face her cunning. He stood, donning it, dark green overcoat, and left the palace in the rain. His destination was Highgrove House, where Princess Anne, his aunt, was resting after a diplomatic tour. Anne was someone William deeply respected, not only for her dedication to the monarchy, but for her bluntness and unwavering loyalty to tradition. If anyone could stand with him in this fight, it was her. Highgrove House, with its lush gardens and moss-covered stone walls, exuded peace in stark contrast to the storm in William's heart. Princess Anne welcomed him in a modest parlor, where landscape paintings adorned the walls and a fire crackled. Anne, her silver hair neatly tied, sat with a teacup, her sharp eyes radiating a warrior spirit despite her 60 years. "William," Anne said, her voice low and direct. "You're not here just for tea, are you? What's going on?" William sat across from her, taking a deep breath to quell his smoldering anger. "Anne to Anne." He began, his voice steady but resolute. "The Prince of Wales's scepter has been stolen. Camilla is behind it, using Tom Parker BS to challenge the Windsor legacy. She's spreading rumors that I'm selfish, only protecting my own status. And Father," he paused, his voice catching with disappointment. "Father stays silent." Anne frowned, setting her teacup down with a sharp clink. "Camilla," she repeated, her voice cold, as if the name were a curse. "She's always known how to stir trouble, but this time she's gone too far. The scepter isn't just an object. It's a symbol of honor. If we let this slide tomorrow, anyone could claim to be royal." William nodded, feeling a kindred spark. "Exactly, Aunt Anne. If we don't act, Camilla will keep manipulating and our legacy will be compromised. I need your support to find proof and bring the scepter back." Anne met his gaze, her eyes sharp yet warm. She stood, hands on hips, her stance that of a seasoned warrior. "Honor isn't negotiable, William," she said, her voice ringing like a vow. "I'm with you. We'll turn over every stone in the palace if we must. But be careful. Camilla's no easy foe. She has a network, loyal followers, and she plays dirty." William rose his eyes owl-like with renewed resolve. "I know on Anne, but I'm not afraid. Camilla may have schemes, but I have the truth. And I have you." Anne gave a rare, meaningful smile. "Good. Where do we start?" Over the next 2 days, William and Anne worked in secret. They contacted trusted palace servants, those who had served for generations, who valued tradition above all. Eliza, an elderly maid who once worked in the archive, revealed a crucial detail on the night the scepter vanished. She saw one of Camilla's trusted guards leave the archive with a small wooden box. "I'm not certain. Your Highness," Eliza whispered, her eyes anxious, "but I heard him mention the Queen's orders." William memorized every detail, every name. He and Anne also discreetly reviewed the treasury logs where all entries and exits were recorded. Though Camilla might have covered her tracks, William believed no one could erase every clue. The fire of determination burned brighter. Each piece of evidence, however small, was a step toward toppling Camilla's plan. Buckingham Palace, a dreary afternoon with faint sunlight struggling through gray clouds. In the council chamber, the air was heavy as before a storm. Advisors from seasoned nobles to political veterans sat around the long oak table, their eyes shifting between tension and curiosity. King Charles, I sat at the head, his face haggard and hands clasped tightly as if restraining a wave of emotion. Camilla, in a silver gay silk dress, sat beside him, a smug smile lingering, her eyes sharp, as if awaiting final victory. Across from her, William stood tall, his blue eyes blazing with resolve, flanked by Princess Anne, her steely presence unyielding. William stepped forward, holding a slim but weighty file, the result of his and Anne's tireless investigation. "Honored council members, Father," he began, his voice low but resonant, each word a hammer strike. "Today I stand not just as the Prince of Wales, but as the guardian of the Windsor legacy. The symbolic scepter emblem of power and honor has been stolen. And today I will prove who's behind it." Camilla's brow twitched, but she maintained her composure. She tilted her head, her voice soft but defiant. "William, are you continuing with these baseless accusations? We've discussed this. The scepter is a family heirloom, and family isn't limited to Windsor blood." William didn't respond. Instead, he opened the file, pulling out a yellowed page from the treasury log. He held it up, letting the chandelier's light reveal the handwriting. "This is the archive log signed by Queen Camilla, ordering the vault open the night the scepter vanished." His voice was sharp, unwavering. "This signature cannot be forged." And this, he produced another sheet, is a handwritten statement from Eliza, a servant of over 40 years. She confirmed, seeing one of the Queen's trusted guards leave the archive with a wooden box, the box holding the scepter. The room froze. Some advisors whispered, their eyes darting between William and Camilla. Charles bowed his head, his hands tightening, but he remained silent as if unable to face the unfolding truth. Camilla, for the first time, lost her usual confidence. Her lips pressed thin, a flicker of panic in her eyes, though she quickly regained composure. "These prove nothing, William," she said, her voice trembling slightly, but still defiant. "A signature, a statement. You think that's enough to accuse the Queen?" William didn't answer. He glanced at Anne, who nodded, her gaze cold as steel. Anne stood, her voice ringing with unyielding authority. "Royal honor cannot be bartered." "Camilla," she said, each word a slash, "you crossed a line by touching the Windsor legacy. These aren't just papers. They're the truth. And the truth never sides with those who betray tradition." Camilla opened her mouth to retort, but before she could, the chamber door swung open. Tom Parker B.S. entered, his face pale, holding the familiar oak box. The room erupted in murmurs, all eyes on him. Tom trembled, his gaze shifting between his mother and William. I can't keep it anymore," he stammered. "The scepter, it's here." He placed the box on the table, opening it to reveal the scepter gleaming under the light. Camilla froze, her face ashen. She glared at Tom, her eyes blazing with anger and betrayal, but he bowed his head, unable to meet her gaze. Charles finally looked up, his eyes filled with pain. He looked at Camilla, then the scepter, but said nothing. His silence was a verdict. William stepped forward, taking the scepter, his fingers tracing the ancient Celtic patterns. He turned to the room, his voice ringing like a vow. From now on, anyone who dares touch this legacy will have no place in this palace. His words swept the room like a cold wind. Advisors bowed their heads, some nodding in respect. Camilla sat, rigid, her hands gripping her dress, her eyes darkening as if realizing she'd lost a game she thought she'd won. Anne placed a hand on William's shoulder, her eyes gleaming with pride. "Well done, William," she whispered for his ears alone. "You did the right thing." William nodded, but his victory felt hollow. He glanced at his father, still silent, and knew this battle wasn't just with Camilla. It was about protecting what mattered most, not just the legacy, but the honor of the monarchy, and he would never let it be compromised again. Buckingham Palace was cloaked in a suffocating silence, as if its ancient stone walls held their breath before the weight of an impending judgment. A closed council meeting was convened to address the aftermath of the scepter's theft, a plot laid bare by undeniable evidence. Camilla's signature in the treasury log, Eliza's testimony, and Tom Parker BSE's trembling confession as he returned the scepter. William knew this wasn't just about honor. It was Camilla's challenge to royal tradition. To protect the Windsor legacy and prevent future transgressions, a severe punishment was unavoidable. William stepped forward, his voice low, but sharp, resounding like a vow. Citing royal law, the immutable rules that shaped the palace for centuries, he demanded Camilla's punishment for overstepping her authority, manipulating the archive, and involving Tom in a scheme that disrupted the Windsor legacy. He proposed a clear sentence. Camilla would be stripped of access to the royal archive and barred from participating in ceremonies tied to the Windsor legacy for 1 year. Tom Parker BS would be banned from official royal events until the council reviewed his case. Each word was carved in stone, leaving no room for ambiguity. The council listened, their eyes shifting between shock and agreement. Lord Edward Langley, the white-haired earl, nodded slowly, his gaze reflecting respect. Lady Margaret, once swayed by Camilla's whispers, now sat silent, her face acknowledging William's defense of royal honor. Some advisors murmured, but none opposed. The truth, backed by sharp evidence, silenced all doubt. One by one, they nodded, endorsing William's verdict. Charles sat motionless, hands clasped tightly, head bowed. He understood the gravity of the moment. Camilla, the wife he loved, had gone too far, and though his heart ached, he couldn't deny the truth. Under William's resolute gaze and the council's consensus, Charles took a deep breath, his voice as he approved the verdict. His words were brief but heavy, sealing Camilla's defeat before the palace. The news reached Camilla in her Clarence House parlor. She sat clutching a champagne glass so tightly it seemed it might shatter. When the servant delivered the verdict, her face flushed with fury. She stood, her silk dress rustling, her eyes blazing. She couldn't believe William, the stepson she once underestimated, had cornered her. Worse, the council whom she'd manipulated with whispers had turned against her. Camilla rushed to Charles's study, her steps urgent, hoping he would intervene. She burst in her pleading eyes, locked on the husband she believed would always shield her. But Charles sat silent behind his desk, his hands trembling, his gaze lost in unspoken thoughts. His silence, like a cold stone wall, shattered her hopes. The evidence signature testimony, Tom's actions left no room for defense. Charles's silence and William's resolve made Camilla realize she had lost utterly. The pride that once carried her through Peace corridors crumbled like a sandcastle before the tide. She wanted to fight, to use her cunning to turn the tables, but William's cold gaze in her mind and Charles's pained silence showed her every door was closed. Camilla bowed her head, not in remorse, but because she had no choice. She accepted the punishment, each term cutting into her fractured pride. As Camilla left the room, her silhouette diminished in the dim light, her steps heavy with the weight of her shattered ambitions. Charles remained seated, head bowed, unable to face the consequences. At the palace's other end, William received word of the council's approval. He stood by a window, watching the rain, feeling no joy in victory, only emptiness. He had protected the legacy, but at the cost of a deeper family rift. Yet he knew he had done what was right for royal honor, the Windsor legacy, and his future as king. News of Camilla's punishment spread through the palace along marble corridors and hushed rooms. The council, once swayed by Camilla's whispers, now regarded William with renewed respect. Lord Edward Langley sent a brief but weighty letter pledging full support for his decision. Lady Margaret, once uncertain, now met William's gaze with acknowledgement that he was not just the heir, but the true guardian of tradition. Even the servants, guards, and quiet palace staff whispered of him with reverence, as if he had become a living symbol of royal honor. In his Kensington Palace study, William sat at the oak desk, gazing at the garden where roses swayed in the wind. Kate entered, her gentle yet steadfast presence, a quiet anchor. She placed a hand on his shoulder, saying nothing, her presence enough. William turned, his eyes softening as they met hers. He knew Kate more than anyone understood what he'd endured, not just the battle with Camilla, but the burden of a future king. He took her hand, a small but profound gesture, as if to say he wasn't alone. The scepter was back, and with it, William had asserted his authority, not through pomp, but through steadfast loyalty to the legacy. Yet deep down, he knew the war with Camilla wasn't fully over. She may have bowed to the verdict, but her final glance as she left Charles's room, a look of defiance haunted him. Camilla was not one to be easily defeated, and he knew she might be plotting another move in the shadows of power. William stood and walked to the window, gazing at London's clearing sky. He felt the weight of an invisible crown on his shoulders, but instead of fear, he embraced it with resolve. This palace, with all its schemes and challenges, was his to lead. He had protected the legacy this time, and he would do so again, no matter the foe. In his mind, he repeated a silent vow: anyone who threatened the royal legacy he would face and defeat, whatever the cost. The archive door closed behind him, the lock clicking like a final affirmation. The Windsor legacy was secure, and William, with the heart of a future king, was ready for anyone.